see if this is working.
Had been in my
Right, according to what I've just seen, recording's in progress. So anyway, um, so hello everybody. Yeah, we are recording. It's Dino and myself. We've been quite quiet for a while because obviously for 6 weeks I've been in Australia. I'm back, as you can see, from the familiarity of my kitchen unit behind us. So glad to be back in Scotland. Just a few days ago, my wife was on Facebook and she all of a sudden it went, "What's this in Jehovah's Witnesses and the blood?" Somehow she follows Lloyd Evans. Don't know how that happened. It's don't know how that happened. But anyway, Lloyd had done this video about the blood, and I just thought, oh, I'll wait till somebody else does the video because I can't stand listening to him. And coincidentally, a guy, I'd say a friend of the channel, but that does sound like Lloyd Evans. Anyway, so a guy called Peter Bruce, friend of the channel, sent us a link to a guy who put to a video who's called at XJW Analyzer. And Dino's seen this video, and I finally got time to watch the video today about this change with Jehovah's Witnesses and blood. And what I found more interesting about this, because it will bring out how this, we can talk about how this doesn't apply for a lot of cases, but how for the things that the witnesses let creep in, and now looking back on it, I'm going, how in the world was I prepared to accept what they said about the blood? It's extraordinary, which really makes me worry about how gullible I must have been, or all of us were, all witnesses still are. So basically, allegedly, the new thought is and I've not watched the Jehovah's Witnesses version of this yet. The sort that's been leaked that apparently Jehovah's Witnesses now can have their own blood stored only for them. Can't pass it on to a pal, and then they then can have that in case they need to have their own blood for an operation. Now, as far as I was concerned, going by everything else I knew, that once the life's in the blood, and according to the little blood cards that you used to get, no, you can't. I remember, just remember, Gina, remember the bit where you could do this bit where you'd have to get your blood to go through a circulatory system to go back into your body. Remember that one?
yes. Yeah, I'd actually looked up. There's a question from Readers 1989 on
Yes.
jw.org. Question from Readers 1989, March 1st, and it actually talks about that, how it left that to a matter of conscience. So you could have an operation, and as soon as the blood is coming out, they're letting it go into a machine that recirculates the blood. So it's going out, the machine's cleaning
Yes.
the blood and putting it straight back in.
That's
So what
right.
they were saying was, as long as there was a continuous flow of the blood out and straight back in again, they were saying it was
Yes.
you could accept that as part of your circulatory flow, and that was, I think it put that down to conscience. You could, if you felt that that was not an interruption in your blood flow, your
Yeah.
circulatory system, then it was okay.
Yes. That's right. So I'm glad you looked that up that source because I'm just going off my memory here. So it was a conscious matter, but still, this you couldn't donate blood and somebody else use it. You couldn't have your own blood stored at the side. And the video was interesting, saying that even if you want your blood stored at the side, it only lasts for so long anyway. So for a lot of instances, even now with this new change or this new shite, is that most of the time when you need blood, it's an emergency. You're in a car crash, all of a sudden you've got to have an operation which you weren't expecting because you've got whatever it is, or your wife gives birth or something like that. Half the time you can't, or you're not well enough to take a blood out of your body to have it put on hold for an operation you're going to get in a month's time. So still, it doesn't quite work out here. It's always because and it's a bit bizarre because what he brings out, and I'd never thought about this before, but this whole bit that I don't know when they changed it, Dino. This bit that you could get fractions of blood. Do you know what I mean? There was like no blood at all, and then he went, hold on a second, you can take fractions of blood, and these would be from other people. So you're benefiting from everybody else donating their blood. You wouldn't have the whole blood put into you as a transfusion, but you could take fractions of that blood, um, to help you whatever you needed. I don't remember when that did change in my lifetime, but I can't remember when it was.
Yeah, I think it changed after we both left. I think that was probably top of my head. It was maybe 2000s or something. I remember Tam speaking about this. Tam Stewart speaking about it. But it was definitely a good bit after we basically stopped
All right.
attending. Um,
Okay.
but I mean, even that, the fractions of the blood, if it's derived from the blood,
Yes.
personally, I couldn't see how that justified it. You know,
Ah,
um, you're breaking it down to constituent parts, but it's still
it's still,
it's someone else's
yeah.
blood.
It's somebody else's blood, and the
So,
whole thing was once it's supposed to leave the body because the life force in the blood, and that, and as
mm,
soon as it leaves your body, oh, by the way, that now belongs to God. Oh shit! Yeah, it's just bizarre. But it's a bit like I was trying to see if there was a parallel to this, and I was thinking about Jehovah's Witnesses and gambling. And for instance, you could go up and say, I want to gamble on a football result of 22 players. Well, you can't do that, brother. But using the same parallel, that means you could maybe put on a bet on one component of those 22 players that one you could get say, well, I'm going to put a wee slide bet on here that a striker's going to score one goal, two goals, or get sent off, or when he's going to score. As long as I'm not gambling the whole result, that's okay. But if I just take out one component out of that and still gamble, that's okay. That's how this, I'm trying to make sense of this. It's just bizarre.
I, the way I would look at it, it's a bit like saying it's okay to read an issue of Playboy as long as you're just reading the articles. It's
Yes.
just a constituent part of the magazine. Only buy the
I,
Playboy to read the articles.
I wasn't thinking about that. It's all right. It's all right to read. It's all right to watch porn as long as it's only 10 minutes of the hour and 20 on the film. If they go on, I wouldn't know personally, but it's just really funny how the witnesses thought that was acceptable to get fractions of blood and say, hold on a second, where's this come from? And then I think it was a conscious matter anyway. And the reason why I say this is a bit personal thing in this is that when my wife's mother was in hospital, our friend of the channel, Johnny Allen, was actually there as part of the hospitalising committee, the HLC, friend of the channel.
Mhm.
Anyway, hi Johnny, and he was there, and he was actually saying, because obviously none of my wife's siblings were witnesses at this time, and that they were actually saying that maybe a blood transfusion would have helped my wife's mum to extend her life. And they were thinking about that, and Johnny told them he was already prepared to step in to stop that happening. At that time, he's already prepared to say, "Sorry, family, it doesn't matter. Got to think about what your mum's wishes are," because at this point she was, I believe, unconscious. So that shows. And another time I had a real big ding dong with my when my dad got remarried, and we went to visit him, me and my wife did. One of her sons came in, and he sat down, and he had children, and he says, "Can I ask you a question?" And I absolutely knew what was going to go on next. I'd been having a drink, and he went on and says, "Why don't you give if you're a child?" And I didn't at the time. I needed blood. Would you get to blood? And I had to go no, and he went absolutely ape shit. and my dad had to escort him out the room. They were gone about 15 minutes, and then the
Gosh.
dad came back with punches on his face because they'd had a fight in the front room about our
Mhm.
stance on the blood. And now, of course, with this thing that they're coming out to say that to make it's like, to me, they're just watering down all their beliefs to try and make the witness organization beliefs to just be a little bit more not as fundamental, if you know what I mean. That they're trying to make it just like more mainstream Christian organization to make it easier for the
Mhm.
witnesses to encourage new ones in, or for ones who are there at the moment to stay there. And I think this is just another example of this.
Yeah. I was watching one video today that someone put up, and somebody made a comment and saying, I bet you to a pound there's somebody high up in the organisation is going in for an operation soon,
All
like
right.
a governing body member, and they're going to want to
Yeah,
store their blood or something like that.
yeah,
Um, but that's, it's just speculation, but you never know. It could be something like that. But they're certainly easing so many things now,
yeah,
making it easier, less strict. Um, but the biggest thing is it comes back to this point about, I mean, is this question from Reader's article I've got on screen here? It clearly points out that it talks about this storing of the blood, um, autologous blood. Um, it rules it out. Whilst it's talking about some things it's down to conscience, it's saying the actual storing of the blood separate
yeah,
from the body for
yeah.
a period of time is just it's no
It's a
go.
no-no.
And they
Yeah,
give all the
it's
scriptural
forbidden.
reasons. Yeah, they give all the
Yeah,
scriptural reasons why they come to that conclusion. So again, it's this point, there's the governing body making that point back in 89. So they're directed by the Holy Spirit. So any decisions that they're making or coming to, studying the scriptures, that's supposed to be Jehovah's viewpoint. So how we now get to this point today, and there's a change. So whose mind is changing again? It's
yes,
clearly not Jehovah's. He's not going to change his mind on it. So it,
no,
it just shows again, this is just opinions of men.
exactly.
I mean, the governing body for years, when they voted, you would have all these really the long-standing characters who you wouldn't want to vote against if they were voting one particular way, very influential. Whereas now it seems to be that new people come in, new thinking, so changes happen. It doesn't look like it's the Holy Spirit that's directing these men and directing these decisions. I mean, it really is clear now, I think, you know?
Well, matter of time before birthdays are in, Dino. I've told you it's a matter of time.
Yeah.
Birthdays are coming back. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
But anyway,
it will.
it's what the only thing that I think about, I may have said this to you before. If I've not said this to you before, I've definitely said it on my own. Is that when it comes to beards, when it comes to beards on, beards off, okay, we can laugh about it now, the way that they've all
Mhm.
gone along, or women with slacks and not reporting all your hours, and carters who don't speak to people. Okay, yeah, you can do this, and we can and we can go up to carters and say, look, you've changed this, and changed that, changed that. However, none of that, not wearing a beard or having a beard, never killed anybody. Okay? Because if
Mhm.
when we were told you can't have a beard, it wasn't life and death. When we were saying, look, brothers, you shouldn't have a beard, we're going, all of a sudden it didn't mean that in a week you'd be dead. According to this guy's video, he by some independent research, allegedly 1,000 witnesses every year die due to not having blood, and he
Mhm.
figures out apparently 30,000 witnesses have died. It's a figure you'll never ever get from the witnesses, because they're not transparent. However, this is what I was thinking about today, and how this affect me and you, is because when we both had were married in the truth and had our children in the truth, both of
Mhm.
us, yeah.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
based on these men, on their interpretation of the scriptures, and I would suggest that both you and I thought that we were people who have are able to think for ourselves or understand or and not be sheep, if you know what I mean, not be led along. And yet,
Mhm.
if and it does happen in pregnancies, you had two boys, I had one boy. Imagine during the birth of our sons that all of a sudden our wives all of a sudden were literally whatever reason were literally bleeding out. And then I may be unconscious at this point and can't make the choice. And we, because they would have had the
Mhm.
blood card, and we all witnesses with the blood
Mhm.
card, and then what we purely on these guys' interpretation of scriptures would have then said, I'm sure I would have done the same, because that guy said there in this article in the 90s where it showed all these young witnesses who died, who's died. You know, if you give me a blood transfusion, I take it as being raped, and we, I'm sure, would have then allowed our wives, and even our wives on our boys, to die because of this, because of these guys' interpretation. And the reason why that I struggle with it is because at the time I would have thought, yeah, oh, they've got it right. Got to do it Jehovah's way. It's not about the now. It's the resurrection. It's unbelievable. How did we end up in a position that we potentially would have lost our wife and lost our children based on this?
Yeah. I just want to say, first of all, we're a wee bit light-hearted earlier on, but that aside, it's a serious subject. It definitely is, and the thought that there are people, witnesses, who have lost wives and children years ago, whereas now they're saying that this procedure is now available. Why wasn't it available in their day? And they might not have lost their loved one.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
anyone in that situation, my goodness, what they must be
I
feeling
know,
now to think, well,
I
why would
know.
Jehovah not allow it then, but you can allow it
Yes,
now, but I've lost my loved one.
yeah,
Coming down to when I think about it, I mean, I would have been all right in the day making a decision for myself as an adult,
yeah,
whether to take it or not. Um, it's a tough one to think, what would you do if your wife needed one and
yeah,
was unconscious and you had to,
yeah,
very difficult. But in recent years, when I thought about it, luckily, like Stefano, for instance, he had a small operation as a child. Thankfully, it wasn't a particularly invasive operation, a small procedure, so blood didn't really come into it. But thinking now, if that situation had arisen, um,
yeah,
I would have got disfellowship because there's
yeah,
no way. You never know until the situation. You can say what you're going to do, but when that
yeah,
situation occurs, that's when you find
yeah,
out what you're going to do.
yeah.
And I think if I had been in that situation, I don't think we could have let a child die, you know.
I know,
But
I know.
for those who were have been in that situation and thought they were being loyal, what they must now be thinking, it's you don't want to. It doesn't bear thinking
No,
about what they must be feeling.
I
Um,
know.
and one of the sites I was looking at, somebody had posted comments saying they'll be waiting on the claims coming in now.
Yeah,
Um, People looking for reparation for letting loved ones die because the organisation told them to. Yeah, it's a horrible thought. But no, I think
honestly,
yeah, go
I
on.
just thought about it today. How can grown men or women or parents who have if their child is bleeding out and an accident or whatever it is, and then actually say, no, we're going to make a decision and allow the child to die. It's unbelievable. It really is.
I mean, looking at this, we've got to also say the other side of it is that they're now making it a conscience matter. So that's a better decision. And that gives people that uh, opportunity, that option. So that's not a bad thing for a practicing witness today. But the arriving at that decision, as we've said, is what's really terrible. And unfortunately, it's not going to help. I think a couple of the recent cases have involved people with leukemia. But unfortunately, I mean, I'm no medical expert, but um, I don't think storing your own blood would help a leukemia
No.
patient because it's their
Mm.
own blood, their own bone marrow. It's the problem. So this wouldn't
Yeah.
really affect those situations. But for someone in a situation of elective surgery where you've got time to prepare, then obviously
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
change is a good thing for the witnesses, gives them that option.
Yeah.
But you're asking about kind of experiences. I remember being on the doors years ago in the 80s in Prestwick, and I remember coming across a woman who was a nurse, and she gave us a right talking to about the blood issue. And she was saying, blood's perfectly safe. You're terrible for not taking it. It was only a few years later when the haemophiliacs scandal
Yeah.
began and
Yeah.
it came out that this blood, because she went on about how they test the blood and they purify it and there's no problems. And of course, it was a big thing in the UK, particularly in Scotland, but all the haemophiliacs got that, um, whatever it was they got, there was a kind of an extract from blood that had come from America, from American prisons, and it was full of
Yeah.
all sorts of diseases, and they were afflicted by that. And it turns out so government had to reimburse them, compensate them
Yeah.
because the blood wasn't safe. So, I mean, me personally, today, even today, I'd be wary. I would still be wary myself about taking a blood
Mm.
if it wasn't absolutely necessary. If it was life
Yeah.
saving and it was the only option, then maybe now,
Yeah.
yeah, I probably would.
Yeah.
But personally speaking, for medical reasons and medical reasons alone, I would only use it as a last resort if it was the only thing.
Mm.
But that's just my kind of personal view on it.
Well,
Because
hopefully it'll never happen. Hopefully we won't
yeah,
need it.
yeah,
But
mm,
it's I don't know. It's obviously uh, next time we see the cost, I'm going to have to go with this because literally, it's the same thing that we always come back to, which you just said before. How can you state this in stone and use all these biblical reasons, all these scriptures to come to a standpoint, and then only a couple of decades later, then go, oh, actually, now those scriptures don't support that. It's something else, and you're thinking, no, come on. If people in this organisation, we laughed about beards, oh, beards. But when it comes down to life and death situations, and now the changing the goalposts, well, hopefully for the better in this point, because you don't want people to die because of their religious belief. But at the end of the day, is people did die. People have died. Like 1,000 a year. 30,000 in total, perhaps. People have died, and now all of a sudden, like you said before, if you've lost a loved one, and there was an ability that perhaps, they could have had blood, known this life and death operation, and they were well enough to donate blood, and then they bled out, and you're thinking, Jesus Christ, as you said, how much they feel. But so, next time, we, as you know, me and you, we have gone down the beard route many times when we've been out with the carters, just having a laugh with them. But this, to be honest with you, isn't even a laughing matter. This change now, when you think of the
yeah.
people it's affected, it's staggering.
And again, they can't write this down to. the light getting brighter or
No.
progressive revelation, because it's not progressive revelation. If you're going from a position where you've studied the scriptures and you say, no, the scriptures say that's totally wrong, you can't then later on and say, oh no, this isn't totally wrong. This is allowable. That's not progressive revelation. That's just chopping and changing.
Mm,
You know,
yeah,
progressive revelation, as we've said before, just puts further information, a better understanding, but it doesn't change the
yeah,
original teaching. So if they're saying
yeah.
something was completely no, you can't do that, and then say, actually, you can, then that's changed the original view. So that's not new light. It's not progressive revelation. It's just changing the goalposts, as you said.
It's well, I'm obviously, next time beat the Carters either, together or apart. That's a song I
Mhm.
once. Yeah,
Song,
but
yeah.
if you, it's a great song. You might find it on Spotify. But anyway, I'm going to bring this up because obviously I've bored myself to death with the beards and further education. But this, I think, it is. You just want to see these people trying to explain this. Justify this change and just say, did Jehovah not love the witnesses enough 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Has all of a sudden decided he's a little bit more loving now? He cares that wants to make sure that they do live, that if this is a way out. Why didn't he care 25, 30 years ago? I want to ask them these questions and just see their response.
The other thing as well is the one video I watched today where it was an ex-witness woman was going through this and she was reading out sort of terms of what is believed to be the leaked speech, what's going to be said. And she said once again, there is no mention of any apology for the deaths of ones who might have
Yeah,
survived had this been revealed earlier. No inkling of any apology at all. And again, if that's the case, if they don't apologise, uh,
yeah.
it's
Well,
reprehensible again.
Well, they're not going to put. Literally, I was trying to think. What can I think of? Who can I think of recently who does things, doesn't apologise, that ends up causing chaos and death? And it's obviously
Mm.
Donald Trump and the
Yeah.
MAGA movement.
Mm.
It's exactly the same thing. Me
Mm.
stuck in Australia for 12 days and out of pocket by well thousands of pounds.
Mm.
To get home, and the stress that it gave us, and other people are still stuck there.
Mm.
Just no, no, I'm sorry. Nothing. He's not come on and just said, I'm really sorry. And it's this, and yet all the MAGA movement think he's absolutely brilliant, but believe everything he says. He could commit murder. He could be all over the Epstein files. He is. Anyway, he could all these things he could do. It's just bizarre. It's just like you just see that MAGA's a cult, and then you see the Jehovah's Witnesses the same. When you
Well,
can't then just look at it outside, and it's all whatever these guys say, you believe. You're in a cult.
yeah, yeah. It was interesting. You had all the sort of prayer group in at one point in
Yes.
the Oval Office, and they're all praying over
Yeah.
him. And then
Oh,
some source was talking about how these mad religious leaders in Iran, the
yeah, that's right.
a
Yeah.
theocratic government, and they've got
Yes.
all them praying over Trump. It's it's a
Oh.
mad world. Mad world. And by the way, how did the promotional tour of Australia go for the promotional tour for She Is Shunning release?
Um,
Or She
let's
Is
just
Shunned?
say, let's just say, I think people worldwide shunned the release of she is shunned, which was a shame. However, I was over in Australia when it didn't then hit Spotify, so I was able to say, to my phone, you still got, on it and say, Alexa, play She Is Shunned. Oh, Jesus Christ. For the people now, I'll say it a bit loud. Alexa, play She Is Shunned. They'll probably hear it going off all the way. But anyway, I will just get 5 more plays there. Oh dear. So
Mm.
yeah, nah, never mind. On to the next big hit there, Dino. Right. Anyway,
Yeah.
right. We'll have to talk about that another time. Right, I'm afraid we're gonna have to call it a day because we've only got literally 120 seconds to say our goodbyes, and then I'll chat to you after this before the match starts. This is my
Okay,
watching it, everyone. I've got a football match to watch, but anyway, we literally only have 120 seconds. But it's nice to speak to you again, Dino. And
good to
I
see you
always
back.
said I like. I like to do when there's something worth talking about, it's worth talking about, and definitely that subject. We just couldn't let that one go. Anyway,
Mm.
I'll now cut this short and I'll chat to you shortly. So it's time to say it's a goodbye from me.
Good night, folks. See you again.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye for now.